Cleopatra and Zenobia. Two queens of the East, one unbroken legacy of power. History often remembers its greatest rulers as conquerors, lawmakers, or empire builders, but there is another category of leadership reserved only for the rarest figures, those who defy the entire world simply by standing tall. Cleopatra VII of Egypt and Zenobia of Palmyra belong to this category. Two queens separated by more than 2 centuries, yet united by their audacity, political genius, and an ability to challenge the most formidable empire the ancient world had ever known, Rome. Their reigns illuminate how intelligence, charisma, and strategic mastery can momentarily bend the course of history, even when facing overwhelming odds. This comparison explores their leadership styles, their political ambitions, their diplomatic and military strategies, and the enduring cultural shadows they cast across time. Cleopatra. The last pharaoh of Egypt, power through diplomacy, intelligence, and statecraft. Cleopatra VII Philopator ascended the throne in 51 BCE, inheriting a fragile Egypt threatened by internal division and increasing Roman interference. Unlike many monarchs of her era, Cleopatra was not merely a ceremonial figurehead, she was a deeply educated, multilingual strategist who understood that survival required both wisdom and bold alliances. Her leadership style was defined by political calculation and an instinctive grasp of realpolitik. Cleopatra leveraged Egypt's immense wealth, grain, gold, and the strategic position of the Nile to secure alliances with the two most powerful Roman leaders of her time, Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony. These relationships were not superficial romances as often portrayed, but carefully orchestrated diplomatic partnerships designed to protect Egypt's sovereignty. Cleopatra governed actively. She implemented administrative reforms, stabilized Egypt's economy, strengthened its naval forces, and presented herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis to unify her people under a shared spiritual identity. On the battlefield, she was not a commander like Alexander, nor a legal reformer like Hammurabi. Instead, her brilliance lay in coalition building, diplomacy, and psychological influence, forms of power every bit as impactful as military force. Her downfall came not from lack of intelligence or political skill, but from the unstoppable rise of Octavian, the future Augustus, who sought absolute Roman dominance. After the defeat at Actium in 31 BCE, Cleopatra chose death over humiliation, ending not only her own life but also 3 millennia of pharaonic rule. Her legacy, however, refused to die. She became the eternal symbol of female power, intellect, and the tragic struggle for sovereignty against an empire. Zenobia. The warrior queen of Palmyra, power through conquest, courage, and ambition. Zenobia, or Septimia Zenobia, ruled the Palmyrene Empire in the 3rd century CE, rising to power during the chaotic crisis of the Roman Empire. After the assassination of her husband, King Odenathus, Zenobia seized control as regent for her young son Babalathus, but quickly proved she was far more than a placeholder queen. Her leadership was defined by boldness and military expansion. Within just a few years, Zenobia launched campaigns that conquered Egypt, Syria, Judea, Arabia, and parts of Anatolia, forming an independent empire stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Her strategy was a brilliant combination of timing, military strength, and regional diplomacy. Rome was weak, distracted, and divided. Zenobia capitalized with relentless precision. Unlike Cleopatra, Zenobia stood at the head of her armies, embodying the archetype of a warrior queen. Ancient sources describe her as disciplined, tireless, and intellectually formidable, fluent in multiple languages and deeply educated in philosophy and history. She fostered Palmyra as a cosmopolitan center of trade and culture, integrating Greek, Roman, and Eastern traditions. Her ambition was not limited to temporary autonomy. Zenobia sought recognition as an equal to Rome. Striking coins in her son's name as emperor and herself as Augusta was a direct challenge to Roman supremacy. Her rise, however, was met with swift retaliation. Emperor Aurelian marched east with a reorganized Roman army, defeating Zenobia and capturing her in 272 CE. Taken to Rome, she was paraded in chains, but according to several historical accounts, she later lived comfortably in a villa, her dignity ultimately unbroken. Zenobia's empire was brief, but her defiance of Rome became a legend. She remains a symbol of courage, independence, and the refusal to submit. A shared flame of resistance and the divergence of destiny. Though Cleopatra and Zenobia lived in different eras, their stories mirror each other in striking ways. Both rose to power in the multicultural East, both confronted Rome directly, both struggled to maintain sovereignty through a combination of diplomacy, strategy, and charisma, and both became legends whose fame grew far beyond their lifetimes. Yet their paths and legacies diverged sharply. Cleopatra's power was rooted in diplomacy, alliances, negotiation, and political maneuvering. She fought not through armies, but through influence, symbolism, and the manipulation of geopolitical forces. Her reign ended in tragedy, but her myth became immortal. Zenobia's power was rooted in military ambition, conquest, expansion, and direct confrontation. She did not seek alliances with Rome, she sought equality or independence outright. Her defeat came through force, yet she survived, and her story remains one of triumph and defiance. Cleopatra represents the last breath of an ancient order. Zenobia represents the last great challenge to Rome's dominance. Cleopatra symbolizes the intellect of a sovereign fighting for survival. Zenobia symbolizes the courage of a queen fighting for empire. Both reveal that leadership does not always come from armies or laws, sometimes it comes from the sheer force of will. They lived as women in worlds dominated by men, yet their decisions reshaped political realities and left echoes that continue to inspire. In the annals of powerful queens, Cleopatra and Zenobia stand as two pillars, one polished by centuries of dramatic retelling, the other sharpened by the steel of resistance. If you enjoyed this comparison, don't forget to support the channel. Likes, comments, and subscribing help keep historical content like this alive. Which two figures should we compare in the next video?